On a quiet Tuesday morning, in a row of identical homes with trimmed hedges and painted mailboxes, something was off. The curtains in one window hadn't moved in days. The porch light, still flickering at noon, had become a whisper across the neighborhood. And the woman who never missed her morning walk hadn't been seen in over a week. What began as a petty misunderstanding, a borrowed item, a misplaced word, a look that lingered too long grew roots. Quietly, gradually, almost invisibly. It wasn't loud. It didn't come with warnings. No raised voices echoing through the walls. No flashing lights or public scenes. Just tension, the kind you feel but can't explain. Two women, side by side, sharing a fence, exchanging nods. And yet, one was quietly unraveling. Before it ended, there were notes slipped under doors. Locks changed. Cameras installed. Whispers traded across dinner tables. The neighborhood smiled but watched. What makes a person reach their limit? When does irritation cross a line? And how far can a quiet resentment stretch before it finally snaps? This is not a story of sudden chaos. It is a story of slow erosion, of suspicion, of territory, of trust. A story where a borrowed bar of soap might mean far more than it seems. She said she felt invaded. She said her space was being trespassed. Not physically, but emotionally. Every time something went missing, every time her suspicions were dismissed, her mind moved closer to something irreversible. They were neighbors. They shared a block. They shared a smile. But behind the smile, one of them was watching, counting, waiting. This is the story of what happens when invisible lines are crossed, and someone decides they've had enough. This was not the kind of place where things went wrong. The streets were quiet, the air clean. People waved when they passed one another. Most had lived here for years. They knew each other's faces and often each other's routines. It was the kind of place where small things mattered. A trimmed hedge, a freshly painted gate, a garden that bloomed each season like clockwork. If someone parked in the wrong spot, they'd hear about it, politely, of course. If a light bulb went out on a porch, a neighbor might show up with a spare. There were no big fences, no tall walls, no security guards. No one really saw the need. Some left their doors unlocked when running to the store. Children played outside without anyone worrying. People shared tools, recipes, and sometimes even meals. In the middle of this calm street stood two houses, almost alike in shape, only different in color. Side by side, not too close, not too far. Nothing about them stood out. Nothing gave away the tension growing quietly inside one of them. No sirens, no flashing lights, just a street like any other, hiding a story no one expected. Her name was Clara. She had lived in that small house for nearly 7 years. Quiet, private, kept to herself. She worked part-time at the local clinic, helped out in church once a month, and spent most of her free time alone. Not many people knew what she did after dark. Some said she liked puzzles. Others said she had no phone and didn't use social media. A few neighbors thought she was just shy. Others felt she didn't want to be bothered. She spoke softly, never raised her voice. But sometimes people noticed she watched, from her window behind the curtain just out of view. Her name was Julia. She moved in 2 years ago with her teenage daughter. She was friendly, liked to talk. She brought cookies when she moved in, hosted a yard sale the first weekend, even invited neighbors for tea now and then. She had a way of showing up, not out of place, just often. A knock to borrow sugar. A visit to ask about the trash schedule. She said she liked making friends. She said she wanted the street to feel like home. Some liked her cheerful way. Others found it a little much. Not everyone wants a neighbor who shows up uninvited. Clara and Julia lived just one fence apart. First, it seemed fine. A few greetings, a small chat, a wave through the window, but something shifted. No one saw it happen. There was no big moment, just small changes, less eye contact, fewer words, and slowly that friendly wave disappeared. It started with small things. A half-used bar of soap she didn't remember touching. A missing towel that later showed up folded in the wrong place. Then, food she swore she bought, gone before she could use it. At first, She thought she was just being forgetful. Maybe she misplaced them. Maybe she used more than she thought. But the feeling stayed. That strange, tight feeling in the chest. The one that says something isn't right, even if you can't prove it. One morning, she couldn't find her slippers. Later that evening, she saw a pair just like them outside Julia's back door. Same color, same size, but she said nothing. Not yet. She began writing things down. Each missing item, each odd sound, each moment that didn't sit well. A bottle gone on the 4th. A spoon left in the sink that wasn't hers. A scent in the hallway she didn't use. It was no longer about what was missing. It was about what it meant. She bought a small camera, the kind meant for safety. She placed it above the kitchen window, another near the back door. Nothing fancy. She just needed to know. The trust she once had, that soft comfort of feeling safe in her own home, was fading. With every item that disappeared, something deeper was being chipped away. It wasn't about value. It was about space, about privacy, about control. Someone was getting too close, and she didn't like it. She couldn't keep quiet anymore. One afternoon, Clara walked straight up to Julia's door and knocked. No small talk, no smile, just one question. "Have you been inside my house?" Julia looked confused, then surprised, then laughed. A small laugh that didn't sit well. Reenactment. Julia steps back, hand on her chest, voice calm. "Why would I ever go inside your house?" The words were simple, but the tone felt like a game. That was the first time Clara said it out loud. The first time she named the feeling. But Julia didn't argue. She didn't yell. She didn't seem angry. She simply smiled and closed the door. Later that evening, a folded note showed up under Clara's doormat. It said, "If you're not well, maybe you should talk to someone." She hadn't told anyone about her cameras, or her notebook, or the way she double-locked her doors at night. But now it seemed like someone knew. From then on, things got colder. No more greetings. No more borrowed sugar. Just glances that lasted too long. Steps that seemed to follow. Doors that slammed louder than before. Another note appeared, stuck to her gate. "Stop watching me." It wasn't clear who wrote it, but Clara felt it was meant for her. People on the street began to whisper. They noticed how Julia rolled her eyes when Clara passed by. They noticed how Clara walked faster, spoke less. The calm neighborhood began to feel uneasy. The smiles felt forced. The tension was no longer hidden. It was there, hanging between those two houses like a wire pulled too tight. No one knew how far it would go. There was one item Clara never expected to go missing. A small necklace. Not expensive. Not flashy. But it once belonged to her mother, the last gift she received before she passed. Clara didn't wear it often, but she checked on it often. It was her quiet reminder of where she came from, of someone who had once made her feel safe. She kept it in a wooden box, hidden under folded towels. One day she reached for it, and it was gone. She looked everywhere. Bedroom drawers, kitchen shelves, the floor, her bag. Then her hands began to shake. The room felt smaller, her chest tight. It wasn't lost. It had been taken. She rushed to her camera, the one facing the back entrance. Fast forward. Pause. Rewind. There. A shadow moving past the window. The same bright-colored scarf Julia always wore. A hand on the door. The frame skipped. And then it was gone. Her mouth went dry. Her hands froze. There were no words, just heat. In her face. Her chest. Her throat. Later that day, walking past Julia's house, something caught her eye. Hanging from a hook by the kitchen sink, that necklace. Her necklace. The small gold chain swaying gently. Slow motion footage of Clara's eyes locking on it. Her steps stop. Her breath slows. There was no misunderstanding now. No more guessing. No more second chances. Cut to reenactment. Clara sits on her bed, unmoving. Her fists clench. Her eyes fixed forward. Clock ticks slowly, then stops. Nobody knows what she told herself. Whether it was planned or just a build-up of too much silence. Too many signs ignored. But something cracked that day. Something deep. Something final. Shot fades to black as a muffled sound echoes faintly. The screen holds for a few seconds in silence. A quiet night. The street was quiet. Not a single car passed. No children played. Even the usual birds seemed to stay away that day. Clara had not planned to speak. She had not planned anything. But she found herself walking anyway. Past the hedge. Through the gate. Up the steps. Her breath slow. Her thoughts louder than anything else. She knocked once. Then again. No answer. Inside, the air was still. Something on the stove was boiling. A kettle let out a faint hiss. Julia stood in the living room, holding a magazine, completely unaware. Clara stepped in. She asked only one question. "Where is my necklace?" Julia's face shifted. Not shocked, not afraid, almost amused. She didn't answer. She turned her back instead. And that moment broke something. There were no loud screams, no wild struggle, just the sound of something being grabbed, a heavy glass ornament from the side table. Clara raised her hand, and before she could stop herself, it came down fast. The door was unlocked. Julia fell, hitting the floor hard. There was no movement, only the soft ringing of the kettle in the background. Clara stood still. The ornament slipped from her fingers. Her chest rose and fell, but her face was blank. The room seemed frozen. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She simply stared at the floor and the woman who used to be her neighbor. Silence for a full 5 seconds. Then footsteps. Slow. Careful. A door closes. Morning came, but no one saw Julia walking her dog. She didn't wave from her porch. Her curtains stayed closed. Her phone rang again and again. Friends called. Then her sister. No one picked up. By late afternoon, a knock came to Clara's door. A neighbor asked if she had seen Julia. She said no. But something about her tone didn't sit right. Something about her eyes. That evening, a call was placed to the local station. Julia's sister hadn't heard from her in 2 days. That was unusual. She always called. The police promised to look into it. Flashing red and blue lights outside a quiet home. Officers arrived, knocked, and waited. They walked around to the back and found the door unlocked. Nothing seemed out of place at first. But then a stain on the rug. Faint, dry. But it was there. Then came the broken ornament under the sofa. One piece still wet. Her phone was on the ground, cracked. Her bag untouched. But she was gone. Clara watched from her window. Her arms crossed, face still. When they knocked on her door, she opened slowly. They asked routine questions. When did she last see her? Did she hear anything strange? She didn't blink. She said she had been resting, that she didn't hear or see anything, that maybe Julia had gone out of town. But her hands trembled slightly, and when they asked about the small camera by her back door, she said it hadn't worked in weeks. In the interview with the detective, she answered everything, but she never asked us once what happened to Julia. That was odd, said the detective. They took her in for more questions, sat her down in a small room, gave her water. She didn't ask why. She didn't ask what they found. But the silence was loud. Her prints were on the broken glass. The necklace was gone. The last text Julia sent never delivered. It was no longer about suspicion. It was now about proof. It didn't take long before Clara's name was on every screen. News vans lined the street. People pointed. Some whispered. Others just watched. She was arrested quietly. No struggle. Just silence. The trial began weeks later. The courtroom was full. Not just with people who knew Julia, but with strangers. People who read the story in papers. People who wanted to hear her side. Inside, the mood was tense. The judge spoke clearly. Lawyers moved quickly. Every word was taken down. Every glance was studied. Julia's family sat in the front row. Some cried. Others stayed frozen, gripping tissues or the edge of their seats. Clara's lawyer spoke of stress, of loneliness, of a slow buildup of pressure that went unchecked for too long. They called her a quiet woman. Not dangerous, just overwhelmed. A mind that had slowly cracked. Then came the footage. The broken ornament. The unanswered calls. The timeline matched too well. When Clara took the stand, she didn't cry. She spoke in short sentences. Her voice flat. She said Julia had taken things before many times, and no one believed her. She said she lost control. Her words didn't shock anyone, but they made things clearer. The jury left the room. Hours passed. When they returned, the courtroom fell silent again. The air thick. One word decided everything. Guilty. She was sentenced that day. No celebration. No shouting. Just the sound of chairs scraping the floor and the shuffle of papers being packed away. Outside, people left quietly. The reporters moved on to the next story. But the neighbors, those who once left their doors unlocked, never really went back to normal. The street never felt the same again. Neighbors who once waved from across driveways now looked down when passing each other. Some put up cameras. Others simply moved away. People spoke in hushed tones. Not about what happened, but about how close it had come to them. "She was always quiet," said a man who lived 3 doors down. "Kept to herself. I thought she just liked privacy." Another woman, standing at her porch, shared, "I heard they argued sometimes, but I didn't think it was anything serious. We all have small fights with neighbors, don't we?" Whispers turned into long talks. At local cafes, in barber shops, even outside churches, people tried to make sense of it. Many couldn't. A few pointed out how Clara seemed tired in her last days on the street. Not just physically, but like someone who carried too much and didn't know how to ask for help. Some blamed the system. Others blamed the silence. The truth, maybe, lay somewhere in between. There was also a kind of fear, not of strangers, but of each other. Of the idea that someone you've lived beside for years could break from something so small. Toothpaste, soap, little things. But it wasn't just the items. It was the feeling. The idea that someone had crossed a line and didn't care. Now, the same street where children once played outside fell quiet. Locked doors. Lowered voices. Fewer greetings. What started as a neighborhood dispute left a long shadow. Not just on one family, but on every family living nearby. At first glance, it might seem like a simple case of conflict gone too far. But people who study human behavior often see something deeper. Speaking to a licensed therapist, Dr. Hale, he said, "People are not just reacting to events, they're reacting to how those events make them feel. Being taken advantage of, even in small ways, can stir feelings of being invisible, powerless, or unimportant." The woman's notes, scribbled thoughts, underlined words, lists of missing items. She was trying to hold on to something. Not just the items, but her sense of respect, maybe even her sense of peace. Dr. Hale continues, "When you feel like your space is no longer safe, when your things are touched, moved, or taken without asking, it can start to feel like you're losing control over your life. These situations don't always start loud. Sometimes they begin with silence, then build over time, one ignored sign after another. If someone had listened closely, or stepped in earlier, maybe it wouldn't have gone this far." 3 things that often stay hidden, until they no longer can. It wasn't just about soap, or food, or shampoo. It was about what those things meant to someone who already felt unseen. A quiet pain, building slowly, until one moment cracked the surface. The conversation with him ended. 2 women, 2 homes, 1 street, from friendly greetings to cold silence, from borrowed items to broken trust. A simple misunderstanding grew into something far more powerful, something that neither could pull away from. How close is too close? Where is the line between neighborly and nosy, between overlooked and pushed too far? A moment of stillness. This wasn't just about things. It was about a person's need for peace, for space, for respect, and the cost when that peace is taken piece by piece. The final shots show a courtroom sketch fading into the quiet house, now empty. How well do you really know the person living next door? And how far would someone go to protect their space? Tell your thoughts below. Was this a justified breaking point, or a loss of control that went too far?